Hello, our friends, and welcome back to the channel, where today we will be discussing certain leaks that have appeared on the internet. So this hasn't come directly from Amazon, but still, this is something that we feel we should give some attention to.
Address it at least.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. So, okay, with me here today are my two lovely co-hosts, Mr. Kyle. Hello, Kyle.
Here I am. Thanks so much for hosting. This is great.
Such responsibility. And of course, also Mr. Hen. How do you do?
Hi. Yeah.
We have found on the internet. Does anybody else wants to just, take this away?
Yeah, sure. I just it was on Reddit. Actually, originally in some very minor thread of someone's that someone barged in with links to I think 2 pictures as well as a couple of other links for open source material that wasn't really useful, but a couple of links turned out to be to what seemed to be scans of production documents that referred to mostly characters and some code names, doubles, that sort of thing. Extremely surprising. We had known or guessed some of the information that had been confirmed by those lists, but the lists in themselves were extremely I almost fell back in my seat, really. They were just totally we haven't seen something like that, something this intimate in a long time. I think the last time was like some early set photos that ended up online. Nothing like this.
And at least nothing as comprehensive as this. I mean, the only real information we've had up to this point about like a number of characters was from the Night Edge Media that published the audition descriptions of characters. And this is another case where we have a sort of insight into what these characters could be, what their code names were. So it's super exciting.
It's also nice to have something to double back on, based on what we've been talking about for the last few weeks, right? Like this seems to all but confirm a lot of the things that we've brought up. So that's great.
Yes.
Okay, so should we just go name by name?
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Why not?
Okay, so let me take it away for now. So first on the list, very unsurprisingly, is Queen Miriel herself. So we were kind of expecting her to make an appearance. It's confirmed now that her code name is Asta, which was a name that appeared in the audition tapes a long time ago, and we've guessed and speculated who this person might be. And I think Hen had a really really nice theory that he stood firmly by for a very long time. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
My original thought was that she would be a Numenorian queen, but of an earlier period, Tartarian. But certainly the description was extremely evocative of a Numenorian queen. That was always almost just a given, really. It's very like, I think she's like described as being, lordly and like all these sort of things. Very evocative of a queen. I will say the description is quite old, and there are stuff within this list that would suggest a younger actress in the role. We'll see.
That's true. Exactly, because they were originally looking for an actress like 50 to 60 years old.
Yes.
Which I don't think is the case anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do wonder if I'm just looking at the sheet now, and specifically says Queen Miriel, and I do wonder if there will be a lot of reference to Queen Miriel as opposed to Tar Miriel or what exactly that's about, right?
Oh, sure. That's actually a very important point, because we do have, like, just to go ahead for a moment, we have Tar Palantir, but Miriel is not addressed with the prefix of Tar, and neither is Pharazon. They're both what I call pre-R. And that's very important. It's a very important. It tells you something about the situation and the time period. to a certain extent.
But I
And,
think that the queen here with Miriel, the reason that she's not Tar is just, to make her a bit more recognizable for, I mean, we don't know what the purpose of this list was in the first place. But to me, it looks like maybe it could have been, I don't know, something that the production itself used probably.
Yeah, that could very well be. Yeah.
I have
that
no
makes
idea.
Sense. That makes sense.
But,
I can't imagine her
case,
being referred to as Queen Miriel many times, right?
Yeah.
Certainly not in Numenor, I don't think.
Yeah, it doesn't, imply that she's not going to be referred to as Tar Miriel within the production itself, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And it may well be that she'll be Tar Miriel, at some point in the future, because certainly we don't know how long he'll stay, but Tar Palantir, her father, is in the list. So see.
But she's certainly already, marked as the queen. So I think it's pretty safe to say that she's in charge at some point, at least throughout this first season. And another thing that follows her on the list is the king's bracelet. So anybody wants to bet who's going to be portraying the king's bracelet?
It's a story with a sentient ring. So glory is a big theme here. But I really think
that's true.
But I really think it's just an indication as to that this list probably, is like art department or something.
Yeah, I think so.
No, but I do find it interesting that it's a bracelet and not a scepter, right? I think that's interesting.
But still, the bracelet is something that could possibly be not replacing the scepter, but maybe just like a crown or something like that, because a bracelet is something that you can keep on wherever you go, whereas a scepter is a bit more inconvenient to carry around, I think. So it may be just something to recognize the rulers by, for, I don't know, maybe the common people as well when she's walking around Numenor, just, taking in the sights. Next on the list, we have a certain Tar Palantir. His code name was Sarador.
Which is not a code name that we've heard otherwise.
Exactly. We haven't seen it anywhere. There was no audition tapes. It wasn't mentioned on the casting breakdowns, nothing. But yeah, it says here that he's the king of Numenor, father, old king.
I think they can do stuff with the period of Tar Palantir. And it's a very good starting point to start before the coup.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Why would you miss that? Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
And you can see the relationship between the king, the old king, and Elendil, and the whole faithful organization and everything. Yeah.
Speaking of that, speaking of the coup, we have Pharazon, and we have a son of Pharazon on this list as well.
Yeah,
exactly. Kemen. My first thought here was when I was like, is there a Kemen in the Legendarium? And there isn't, but there's a Kementari, which is a certain Vala, Yavanna. So I think Kemen means earth, something like that.
Interesting.
I wonder if that's a coincidence or they were just looking for a juicy name.
There is something very interesting about Pharazon himself, which is his description. He's described here. And, these descriptions, we shouldn't take them too much because Elendil is described just as a skipper. But still, he's described as the queen's right hand, which is, it's an interesting concept, both in how it helps kind of flesh out the kind of royal court dynamic, but also I think it's a kind of dramatic setup of, he was the queen's loyal right hand, and then, the coup and everything in the political marriage. And so it's kind of setting that up in a way. And Kemen, I think, is actually kind of also setting up a certain dramatic situation in that, spoilers, I suppose. I mean, not really, it's just a guess, but that's not a character that I expect to stick around for very long.
Yeah, same.
Both because we know that Pharazon doesn't have surviving male heirs, but also because I think it's really just there for a kind of to make Pharazon pitiable for losing his son, so that even when he does pretty terrible things, we still kind of feel sorry for him.
Okay, so next up we have the skipper family. So we have, like we've already talked about in our previous shows, we have Elendil, whose code name is Loda. He's described as Skipper. And then we also have his son, Isildur, whose code name was Cole. And also a Dora, whose code name was Shay, and her given name is apparently Kareen. So there's one notable exception, of course. On this particular list, we don't have one Anarion, but I think it's safe to mention that his omission from this specific list does by no means mean that he's not going to be appearing in the show.
Yes.
Agreed,
So before people freak out, this doesn't mean anything. And before people freak out about a sister as well, or a daughter for Elendil, the second age in and of itself has very little named characters. And a lot of those characters are male. And the characters will have to be given, new relatives, friends, co-workers to play off of. So there was always going to be new characters for this show. The fact that from the Elendil's family we only had, Elendil, Isildur, and Anarion, I mean, there's bound to be other people as well. And even if I'm not mistaken, in The Lost Road, correct me if I'm wrong, I think a daughter even appears. I mean, he is given a daughter at some stage, but it's not present in other... Sorry?
I'll pull it up and tell you, but sure.
Yes, please do.
Well, yeah, and on top of that, we know, it's kind of just makes sense. We know from the new Nature of Middle-earth book that certainly families would have had daughters that just wouldn't have been written into the history because they didn't do anything of significance, which, makes sense.
It's actually a very important point. I guess the point that I'm getting at is that this character may also not survive for, at least to the end of the series, which is, tragic.
No.
We'll see. I don't know.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of tragedy, so I think
for sure.
You're not wrong in that assertion.
But the second age is such a shiny, happy, sunny age. Nothing bad happened whatsoever. No floods. So next up, we have 3 characters that are marked as Isildur's friend. I'm just going to read their given names in the show, which are Nolion, Ontamo, and Valandil, which is a name that's probably quite familiar to readers of the Legendarium. So do we have any opinions about this?
I think the first thing that pops out to me is just Valandil, right? That's what Isildur named his son, so
exactly.
It'll be interesting.
I'm thinking this character won't survive either, and then Isildur has a son, and it's like, oh.
Yeah. I like that idea. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, a tragic ending. Poor guy.
I kind of see them playing this bunch up as a kind of like the 4 hobbits only Newman.
Yeah.
Like,
sure, yeah.
At the point, it's like a small fellowship thing.
I got that impression as well. And I just wanted to say that this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. You need to give our characters people to interact with. Exactly. And speaking of characters for our main protagonists to play off of, next up we have Queen Miriel's lady-in-waiting, apparently. So her code name is Lara, and her true name we will find out for ourselves when the show is out, because the name is not very visible.
But it does tell us something that the Queen's right hand and a couple of these credits did, which is that Amazon are really seeming to relish in this kind of fleshing out the royal court. So, there's a right hand and there's a lady in waiting and there's an old king who is maybe kind of infirmed and is actually done by the daughter, and you can kind of see, and Elendil is a relative of the royal line, so you can kind of see this complicated kind of political dynamic that they're building here. So
exactly, which is actually very in striking, contrast with the films, especially with The Lord of the Rings. We do visit several courts, but we never get to see the day-to-day life, which is something that's really exciting to me about this particular show, because we'll get to see how these courts work and, just live and breathe. And I think that's going to be really interesting.
It has kind of the air of a period piece.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's done well.
Yeah. And you need all
But
that
I
for
have
the
faith.
politics and stuff, right? Which we certainly expect to see.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so next up, we have somebody we already know, and it's really, really exciting to see some confirmation. So we have a certain Adar, codename Oren, who is now described as an elf, tortured, corrupted, turned into a warlord, which is something we have heard before. So, Ken, do you want to talk about the last person on the list?
That's interesting, actually. King Durin, which is has a character code name is Kine, and he's described as dwarf king, like big surprise. But he is also father of Durin, and that's interesting because we have information about another possible Durin, Owain Arthur, as Brack, and this isn't Brack.
Right.
This is okay. So we possibly have, another very fleshed out kind of court where we have the elder Durin, the younger Durin, and Brack himself is described as being a father, and there's a queen somewhere in there, I suppose. And it's I don't know. We don't know much about this stuff, but seemingly we have two Durins, presumably like during the third and during the fifth, or the fourth, or during the fifth and during the sixth. All of them are possibly second age Durins. So,
Lakiti and I talked about this last week with Strider, and we mentioned how it's an interesting dynamic to have two Durins. I mean, A, alive at the same time, and B, to have them be father and son. It's kind of an interesting way around the time compression thing.
Could be, yeah. And it could be. If it's not written well, it could sound a bit hokey.
Definitely.
But you could pull it off. It's not uncommon in historical lines that the ruler has a certain hereditary title or kind of royal name that is the same.
So moving on to the second sheet, we have some of the same details, but also some new details, and we can run through that. So first we have Eldian, hero, and then there's a couple names underneath that. Hen, do you want to speak to that?
Body double, stunt double, riding double. We have a couple of first names near a couple of them. And LDN we've basically established that LDN is Galadriel. I mean, that's even at this point. But we do have a young LDN, which is also something that we've established, Emily. Then we have a certain character named Tyra.
Yes, we do. So, okay, can I take this one?
Please do, sure. Yeah.
So So this is actually one of the first characters that have been, brought up to the public years ago. It's been released that she's going to be portrayed by Markella Kavanagh, who was incidentally also the first actress who was publicly announced to be a part of this show. And when we got the first character breakdown for her first auditions, everybody started speculating that she sounds like an elf. So people were heavily speculating that she might be a Calabrian. But for me, the audition tapes and her description it didn't give me that elven vibe whatsoever. Like her audition tapes mentioned wagons and bears and berries and dolls and stuff like that. She was interacting with characters with codenames Brenna and Hannah. It didn't sound very elven to me. So I've always kind of believe that there might be something more. And when we learned that there will be Harfoots or early hobbits in the show, a very good friend of ours, a participant of the Discord and the Reddit, White Wolf, she came up with the theory that she might be a hobbit. So now we finally have some sort of, it's not a confirmation per se, but we can see that she has a scale double. And of course, there is the possibility that, because for instance, the next person on the list, Beldor, who's a codename for Elrond, also has a scale double. But we already know that Elrond is going to be appearing in the Dwarven sets, and he's going to have scenes with dwarves. Now, of course,
scale double.
Yeah, he's a big scale double. That's right. But for Tyra, her scale double is actually a short scale double. So I think this seems that Tyra is going to be one of the main characters in this show, and she looks like she could be a hobbit.
Sure.
So I think everybody's been a little bit anxious about. I think everybody's been a little bit anxious about the presence of hobbits in this show, but now it looks like one of our main heroes could possibly be a hobbit or a Harfoot as well. Okay, so let's move on. So next character on our list is Beldor. So this is, like we mentioned, this is most likely Elrond, and he's going to have a scale double, most likely due to the fact that he appears in scenes with dwarves. Anybody has any comments?
Yeah, it's just a useful thing to remember that scale doubles can be small scale doubles. They can be big scale doubles.
Exactly.
I think that's the case of quite a few of these.
Okay. Do we move
Sounds
on?
great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so next up we have Calanon. He doesn't have a scale double, he only has a stun double.
But we have the name of the stun double. The
Yes,
full
we do.
name, which is significant because the stun double does resemble some members of the cast. I'm thinking especially like Ismail, who's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I think so too. And it would make sense, Ismail is one of the most prominent members in the cast, I think, as far as
credits and names.
Seems to be, yeah.
So he would be pretty high up the list, I think. So next up we have Eric, who has a stun double, but he doesn't have a scale double, which makes sense because, like we've already talked, Eric is a character who goes to Numenor with Galadriel, and he's most likely a man from Middle-earth. Okay, so the next person on our list does have a scale double. As a matter of fact, he has two of them, and that's Derek. So he has two scale doubles and also a stun double. I think that means he could be a dwarf. I think we've theorized about him being a dwarf for quite a long time. His description does, I think, sound like he could potentially be a dwarf. My first thought personally was Narvi. But we'll see how long such a character would have to be around for.
Right.
Sure. But you're right. Partially, it's easy to make a lot of the fact that he has two scale doubles. It could be an availability issue, but it could also be dwarves are in a kind of funny place in scale because they're bigger than hobbits but shorter than. So he may need like
or
a big
orcs
scale
for that
double.
Yeah.
He could need two different scale doubles in two different scales, and it also could be being a dwarf is like a tough job in the sense that it's a lot of prosthetics and stuff, and that would possibly require a bigger crew of people as doubles to kind of fill in those boots, as it were.
So next up we have Brack, like we said, who also has a skill double, no surprise there. And then we have Ada. She also has a skill double. And we've been talking about, we had a leak last week where we were talking about a certain Dwarven queen, and we speculated it could be Eira. And the fact that she does in fact have a skill double makes me think that we may, have hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. And Eira is one of those roles. It's really funny how sometimes an actor can really fit a description. Sophia.
No, good point. Yeah.
It's just you kind of look at the description and you go, I think it was one of my very first guesses. It seems like eons ago. Oh, that's Sophia.
Yeah, it just seems so obvious, right?
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, I would love to see her as a Dwarven queen. I think she'd be magnificent.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it seems to fit.
Okay.
Seems to make sense.
Yeah.
And then we have a couple of Numenorians, Loda and Asta. They don't have any scale doubles, and interestingly, they don't have any sort of stunts listed here as well. That, of course, doesn't mean they won't have any stunt doubles whatsoever.
It could be that they're doing their own stunts, because there are many actors that do that.
And also somebody without a stunt double, at least on this list, is Mr. Oren, which I think is a bit more surprising, since we did have some leaks that he appears on some prolonged battles and stuff like that, or at least on a battlefield.
Right.
Yeah, it could be that his is more of a kind of commander role than doing a lot of fighting. And I think actually that's very plausible because, I don't know, just something about the description of the character doesn't seem he doesn't read like a henchman, he doesn't read like the muscle.
Okay, so Next up, we have Cole, our Isildur. He does have a stunt double.
And even as a name.
Yeah, he does. And next on the list, we have a couple of ladies. So we have Cora and we have Shay. And interestingly, these two don't have any scale doubles. So Shay, as we said, she's a Númenórean. She's Isildur's sister. But for Cora, I know we have been speculating that she could be a hobbit.
Yes.
Of course, the lack of a scale double it's not the be all and end all. She could just not be appearing in any scenes where a scale double would be needed. If we have a group of hobbits, not all of them are going to be interacting with elves or humans or something like that.
Right.
Then we have Kyrin, who is presumably Carrie's son. He has all sorts of doubles. He has a stunt double. He has 2 kid doubles. So yeah, this would make sense if Kari is in fact a part of the village that gets attacked by the orcs. There would be some action involved. So
yeah, and action with kids is always a very touchy subject. You tend to have doubles that are show people standing in for the kids in those scenes.
Yeah,
it's interesting that they list the age there. I don't think that's listed for anyone else.
I think the reason why the age is listed, because the other. Yeah, I think he could grow. He gets introduced to us as a baby or a toddler or something, and then we skip a few years ahead and see him as a teenager.
Cool.
I think that could be it.
Yes.
So next up, we have a character that I find really interesting, and this is May. She has a scale double and she has a stunt double, and we have a pretty good idea who's playing her, and that's Megan Richards. Yeah, exactly.
Revealed by Redanian a while ago.
Yeah, exactly. Redanian Intelligence broke this news. I think it was listed on her agent's website or something.
Sure, a lot of these do. Carrie is the same.
Yeah. So I think people have been speculating that she could be a dwarf, but I think she could also be a hobbit, a friend of Tyra's, something like that. That's my speculation.
Sure, could be, very much so.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
But we'll see. Both of them have stunt doubles, which I think is interesting. They could also just be doubles for, I don't know, riding or running or stuff like that. Okay, so last up we have Mr. Wellin, Mr. Pharazon himself. He doesn't have a stunt double.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, interesting. No stunt double. That's interesting.
Yeah, so he's not gonna be seeing too much action.
And really, just the fact that he's the right hand of the queen, he's like in the court all the time. So
that's true.
Yeah, that would make sense.
He was the one who went to Middle Earth eventually and brought back Sauron, but I think that event is probably not going to be happening in this season.
Yeah, and it's post R.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
we'll just have to wait and see.
Wise words. This has been really, really interesting. I mean, all these leaks have confirmed some theories we had, some leaks we've had before. I think it gave us all a lot to think about. I don't know for you guys, but for me, this got me really excited. So
it's very interesting. Yes,
it's nice to see something that looks to be directly from the production.
Yeah, and we're slowly getting the whole picture together. I mean, at this point, it's just bits and pieces, but at least we're getting some insight into what these characters are going to look like.
Yeah,
who they're going to be interacting with more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Very good.
So thanks for sticking with us till the very end. Any last words, gentlemen?
Yeah, I think we've said pretty much all there is to be said. Very interesting stuff. But until the next time, friends, goodbye.